welcome to our first iteration and video to the Leadership Void. We want to take a minute to introduce ourselves. I'm Enrique Gonzalez. I'm the CEO and founder of the Triad Leadership Solutions. I focus on leadership management and career development and all the things that encompass that, as well as personal development. So I want to give an opportunity to introduce my my partner here, Vince.
Thanks, Enrique. Vince Loran. Good morning, everyone. I am the CEO and founder of Ignite RPM. We provide growth mindset strategies to business leaders and managers to get them unstuck and to maximize results. And as Enrique said, we're here to provide a service and talk about the leadership void. So Enrique, to you, what is the leadership void?
Well, the leadership void in my heart and in my mind is it's an attempt to fill those areas in leadership that are often missed. Those are those areas that create a void. It's not totally negative, but it is those areas that need attention in order to get you to the next level. So most people just go on day to day because the work cycle is habitual. It's something that's routine. But what we try to do is help you step back a little so that you can see that there may be cracks in those routines. And through our help, we aim to fill those cracks, hence the leadership void. What do you think?
Oh, thank you. I did some research, and research shows there's over 75 million Americans that are going to retire in 5 years, which that is going to create a leadership void itself, verbally. But more importantly, and as a military, and you and I are military veterans, is, we grow up and we get a lot of academics, and we have an academic armor on us. And also that becomes our personal armor. And one thing leadership doesn't do, majority leaders don't do, is take off that armor and just be living within their heart, working through their heart versus their mind and what they know and their armor. So being authentic, and that's the void I'm also looking at displaying and working through, being authentic and being true. Yes, you have the accolades and you have all the PhDs and all the degrees, but the void is you're not giving your true self to others and being that servant leader. So that's also, in my sense, why I thought of leadership void being so important, and that those key words of the void of literally the workforce changing and the void of what you're doing as a person and filling those cracks, as you mentioned.
Man, that's so important. I really didn't focus too much on the actual gap in the workforce, which is critical. Once those experts start to move out, then you're going to have another set of leaders coming into right behind them. And, the question really is, how well equipped, how well prepared have they been by those actually exiting? So there's a possibility for void in a lot of those timelines for people, whether they were just starting in, managers, leaders, and the executive suite. But that's a real good point. And my hope is that we will hit all those levels of professionalism and kind of help them transition from one to the other without missing a beat, right? Without having that void. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add to that. So you mentioned, being very prepared and being ready to take on that role of a responsible leader. And one phrase I learned a while ago, which is funny, is like, I'm the best father until I became a dad, right? So I prepared myself all I could, but I really did not execute well, because there's nothing that you can be taught through a book, but you have to execute it yourself. Let's just take this coronavirus example, for example. A lot of us weren't prepared, either though we talk about having contingency plans, either though we talk about having savings for 3 to 6 months. And folks get unraveled of uncertainty. So
Right.
a leader has to be ready for all these uncertainties because the fast pace of the world. So just like this example, real world, what people are faced with, here's where really the rubber hits the road. So prepare is great, but actually the execution, your actions are dictated by what you're doing. And today we can see a perfect example. Who are the true leaders out there today dealing with the coronavirus? And those are really the true leaders in the organization, because they're the ones that put out fires. They're the ones who have to deal and manage with people, and they're the ones that have to go global, right? So,
Right.
and the purpose of this, in my sense, is giving them these tools and opportunities to talk authentically about what exactly can they do to enhance their maximum capacity to empower and motivate employees.
Right. You're absolutely right. This last week has been a true test of all professions, really. But leadership is getting it right in the face, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was just a story this last weekend of a small town down here in Florida. Uh, it was a mayor's meeting, and one of the council members had objected to how the this last week was handled. Um, I had mentioned a week ago prior that this would actually bring the cream of the crop up in terms of leadership, because it is during these specific times, and you and I are well aware, in the military setting, we get crises all the time, right? Well, it's
Mm-hmm.
not a constant, but we see it more than the normal citizen. Um, this was an opportunity for a leader to stand up and do what was right by the citizens, and it didn't go too well for whatever reason. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but then someone with those abilities rose up, and that's what I mean by the cream coming up. That core leadership people rose up, and not in a disrespectful way, but in a, hey, this is what a real leader should be doing at these times.
Mm-hmm.
Made it plain and simple, and basically brought to light the fact that there are voids in those leaders that are right now are be really uh, we need those. We need those leaders to shine. We need those leaders to come out and
Mm-hmm.
do what we have invested in them to do. And when we don't see it, the void is very apparent, And so, uh, this is a time for leaders to rise, and I hope that that this will also be a time where we separate the wheat from the chaff in terms of leadership.
Mm. Well said, Enrique. So you mentioned a point earlier about, how us in the military have had more crisis than the regular individuals out here, citizens, as you mentioned. But, one thing is that we practice and practice and practice and execute it with our eyes closed.
Right, right.
And I think what we're doing here is giving opportunity in the sense of the practice, because as a leader, you get that position, and there's another void of the professional development segment, which I think this is a great segment to talk about. What are we going to talk about during the Leadership Void podcast? So what are your thoughts about what we're talking about during this podcast, so folks can know?
Yeah, the Leadership Boy podcast is going to touch up on a lot of topics, really, but mainly what is in the hearts of the people in terms of leadership, because we just completed a survey, right? Part of that survey was these different things 10 questions, 9 of them really specifically talking about leadership. And for the most part, out of every question, listening, right? Listening was the main thing that came up as a resounding, unified mantra, really, for
Mm-hmm.
leadership. and what people were not seeing from their leaders. Now, listening it's a broad word, right? Because there was a lot of specific things tailored after listening, but listening in general, because as it has been said and many quote, right? People listen, right? They listen to respond and not to understand.
Stephen
And
Covey,
so
yep.
what the people are saying in as far as our survey was concerned, that leadership is more poised to answer than to actually listen to what's being said so they can take action. Back to that action word, right, that we mentioned, that you had mentioned earlier. It's one thing to know what to do. It's another thing to know and actually do it. And in leadership, we desire the latter. We want you not only to know, we want you to actually act on what you know. And listening, and just looking at a lot of those answers, listening was a critical thing. So we'll be talking about listening, right? We're talking about that probably a lot. And a couple of the other things. I don't know if you noticed anything on your end on the survey, and I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, and that's a great transition. So let me put my eyes on, because I wrote down a couple of things.
Outstanding.
To your point, the survey, and I did highlight listening as number one. And a couple of things I think we're going to also talk about, folks, as Enrique mentioned, the importance of listening. And one thing I'll share real quick about that is that we're given 2 ears and only 1 mouth.
Amen.
So, think about that for a second, Also, the importance of setting the example, being humble, truly supporting your people, being that servant leader, building trust also came up a lot. Continue to sharpen your saw is another component we'll talk about, kind of like practicing patience, time management, communication skills in general, again, listening, and emotional intelligence skills. And at times, we'll probably bring in subject matter experts, other leaders to talk about their challenges that they face. For example, like managing differences, diverse groups, the pace of change, time management, motivating others, the benefits of emotional intelligence. And also, we also will throw out a little bit of nuggets like sharing resources. So through that survey, as Enrique mentioned, those are the underlying undercurrent issues we want to put forward in our leadership podcast called The Leadership Void. And we hope you tune in. What are we thinking of doing this, Enrique, so folks can be ready for this?
Yeah, well, that's great. We're trying to make it a midweek show. So Wednesdays, early morning, it'll be right in your basket. You can go in there. You can go in there and enjoy the segment and the episodes that are to come. But we're hoping that we really truly hit the heart of leadership. Now I understand, right? This is one of how many leadership shows are there, right? There's just so many, but we're bringing a different perspective, right? So we have both the military side of leadership, and we also have the corporate side of leadership, the business side of leadership. And so we're trying to meld all those together and bring a holistic view in terms of leadership. And so we hope you tune in and don't forget that this is an interactive thing. So you can send us any topic that you would like to hear on one of the episodes. We'll take it and we'll tally that up and we'll talk about it. And you can always email that to theleadershipvoid@gmail.com. And, me and Vince will tackle those issues and bring them to light.
So again, folks, Wednesdays, be ready, tune in. And anything you would like us to discuss, any topics, theleadershipvoid@gmail.com. And Enrique and Vince, we want to definitely have us take off of that armor that we have and really get to the essence of leadership, which is that void. And as I mentioned earlier, there's there's millions and millions of Americans getting ready to retire. So that is also a void we want to address. So I always reference one thing. It's all about pulling from the book of possibilities versus the book of limitations. So it's all possible, folks. You can be that great leader that you are, and we're just going to prove it and help you enhance those skills. Join us at the Leadership Void on Wednesdays, and you'll be more surprised than you thought. We thank you for your time and look forward to seeing you and hearing from you soon.
Yes, indeed.